Blaine Milam is a prisoner in Texas. If the state has its way, he'll be dead within the hour. This is Execution Watch. Huntsville, Texas, death penalty capital of the Western world, where prison staff is preparing to put Milam to death by injecting him with a deliberate drug overdose. During the next hour, KPFT's Execution Watch will air live coverage of the killing in Texas, the state that carries out 1/3 of all U.S. executions. Join Execution Watch host Pat McCann, criminal defense attorneys Merrill Pontier and Afshin Zand, Huntsville reporters outside the death house, Linda Snyder and Sophia Moreau, and our featured guest, Milam's friend Danny Allen, in conversation with Marlo Blue. The Execution Watch for Blaine Milam begins.
Good evening. My name is Pat McCann, and I'm here tonight with Afshin Zand, my colleague, and our local folks, Linda, at Huntsville, Texas, for the planned execution of Blaine Milam. Mr. Milam has claimed that he is immune from execution due to mental retardation. He has also said that he is innocent of the charge. Those claims have been rejected after repeated habeas attempts in the advanced appellate courts on both the state and federal level. Tonight, we are unfortunately at the last possible opportunity, and so far it appears that there will be no last-minute refuge for him. To give us an update on what's been happening on this, I'm here with my colleague, Afshin Zand, and we are hoping to hear from folks at the scene to see if there's been any last-minute attempts to get him relief. But by him, I mean Blaine Milam. Let's go for 1 minute to see if our friend on scene is able to give us any update. Linda, how are you?
I'm fine.
Great, nice. It's good to see you. Unfortunately, it always seems to be under these circumstances.
I know, I've missed you. I'm glad you're on tonight.
Well, let me just ask you the question. Any update from the scene at this point? What's the status?
No, the attorneys, we were with the attorneys all afternoon, and there's nothing else that they're filing. They have nothing else to file on.
So it's just a matter of time at this point, barring any other unforeseen circumstances?
We all talked to Blaine on the phone. We had visits with him this morning, and then we talked to him on the phone.
I know. How are you doing? What? Oh, shit. There's the... Do you have your...
I did. I remember to bring it tonight.
Linda, how does the... I'm sorry for interrupting you. If you need to speak to someone locally, that's fine. I just wanted to touch base with you. What was his mood? Is he accepting? Is he still hopeful? Or just still confused as to why this is happening?
So I'll get that taken care of.
Oh, next quarter.
Linda. Keep going.
Okay. Folks, we seem to have a technical difficulty with our folks up in Huntsville, where sadly it appears that the state's next execution will take place. While we're waiting to hopefully reestablish contact with Linda, let me introduce my young friend Afshin Zand, and let's talk about his understanding of how we got here.
Thank you, Pat.
I understand that there was a claim of retardation in one of the more recent habeas
Yes, sir.
cases. And was that not proved? Was it decided it was too late? What was the status?
My understanding is that when they asked for them to rehear that issue, they were unwilling to hear that issue.
When you say that, do you mean the state or the federal court?
The CCA is my understanding.
Okay.
And so and there's a lot of ways you can phrase it. It's intellectual disability, I guess, is the more modern way of what they're trying to say. And the issue with he's asserted this from the very outset, that there's an intellectual disability claim, and it's basically a violation of the Eighth Amendment, which would be cruel and unusual punishment. The other really significant thing that they used as far as evidence in order to prove his guilt was what's considered junk science now, which would be bite mark analysis. So on the child, this is a 13-month child, they found bite marks and supposed signs of sexual activity with the child as they were performing an exorcism. Another thing that's interesting that they didn't allow his defense to bring in was the fact that his girlfriend, the mother of the child, had severe delusions where she was getting messages from some kind of higher power, and that's what led them to perform this ritual, as they said, as the police think was happening. They were never able really to prove anything connecting him, Mr. Milam, to the allegation other than these bite marks. And there was a little bit of other evidence, but that was the state's really big, their big contention was the bite marks matched on the child from him.
And since then, based on several studies, bite marks have been discouraged as a means of forensic proof?
Yes, sir. Since then, and there's a lot of issues in litigation that's, the CCA has ruled that they've not entirely discredited it, but the analysis behind it is losing its momentum and it's widely considered junk science now.
All right, so let me make sure I've got this. We have a delusional young woman who pled guilty in order to testify against this fellow and obviously avoid the death penalty. He has made a claim that he is intellectually disabled, which the Supreme Court has said bars one not from serving prison time, but from being executed.
Yes, sir.
The death of this child, and let's be candid, it seems like a brutal death against any person, let alone an infant. But there has never been a third suspect between those two, has there?
To my knowledge, no. It's just between mother of child and her boyfriend, Mr. Milam.
So the state made a choice to take a mentally ill mother and allow her to testify against Mr. Milam in order to establish guilt.
Well, no, the defense wanted to bring that in as a theory that it was actually her doing this, but the trial court would not allow them to bring in evidence of her in basic insanity.
So let me make sure I understood that. The trial court did not allow the defense team to bring up the fact that this woman was mentally ill
sir.
as a way to impugn her testimony.
That's right, and as also as an alternative theory, linking her to these acts and not him, so to basically take away his culpability in saying that he did anything, because his assertion is he didn't do anything.
Switching back to the intellectual disability, or for most people they would understand it as mental retardation.
Sure.
From your review of that, is there any doubt that he actually is?
So I think the problem with the analysis that the state did, there's three prongs actually, and the initial one's the IQ test. And with the IQ test, the courts have ruled now that you can't use partial scores in the determination of their IQ. You have to use the full scale IQ score. The state in this case used partial scores. That's one of the issues with their determination in his retardation. There's also a analysis to see whether there's an evaluation to substantiate significant impairment in adaptive functioning, and rather than focusing on the strengths, the court said that you're supposed to rule on the deficits. the strength that the state ruled or used in their favor was his ability to read.
Just to read.
That's, yeah, just that he was capable of reading.
Okay.
So they're trying to say that he doesn't fall below this cognitive functioning adaptive ability.
Did you happen to get a score from the defense side that they believe is valid?
I did not. I wasn't able to find that.
Okay, so we have a questionable issue on, well, perhaps questionable on the side that the state did not believe that he was mentally retarded.
Right, and then the other thing to consider is it doesn't really come down to necessarily a numerical value, and what they've been trying to make sure is the established law it becomes important for the medical experts' views of what's going on, as opposed to some arbitrary number.
Let's see if we can explain some of that for the audience. A typical score in a retardation claim is an IQ score of 70 or less. That comes against the average score for most people, which is approximately 100, slightly more, slightly less. A genius level would typically be, depending on the score one used, 150 or above. So what you're looking at here is proof that someone, if you count 15 degrees on the score as 2 or more levels, for instance, 15 is 1, 30 less is 2, 15 more is 1, 30 more is 2, then it would be 2 grades lower than the average norm, which is approximately 100. So a score of 70 with a more or less margin of error or below is typically considered arguably within the scale of that. Then there has to be what they call adaptive deficits, which are inabilities to function at a ordinary person's level. For instance, you would have trouble reading a map or navigating your way in the street if you had a map where you were unfamiliar, or getting, for instance, the ability to do simple tasks such as read and understand a bus schedule, handle bank accounts on your own, things that we tend to think are things that most people can do. And those are called adaptive deficits, and they are also a factor in determining this. Typically also you want to have indications of these problems before the formal function of your brain growing is done. So nowadays that's considered to be for males around 24-ish. And at one time it was considered 18 or below. So this should manifest itself at a reasonable enough and early enough time that one can detect it. Am I on that?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you mentioned is with their intellectual deficit, a lot of times what I've noticed with my colleagues that have worked on these types of cases with intellectual disability, there's an arrested development. And there's
A sad but wonderful phrase to describe this.
Right, and that many of them have not just a functioning ability, but their context of life seems to be at a remedial age. So they're operating in an age they would perhaps do better with younger people, but due to the age difference, that would not be considered an appropriate thing. But those are probably the people who they would relate to the best.
And that becomes difficult because, as we know, there is a great deal of shame for the average person to be labeled as retarded or as intellectually disabled. So let's talk about that for a sec. But before we do, let me check and see if we have any further word from Linda back at Huntsville, where the execution will take place.
What year was it?
Linda, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Sorry for the disconnect earlier. Have they, so to speak, crossed the barrier yet?
At 6:07, they went across, the witnesses.
I'm sorry to hear that. For those of you who are watching for the
Murder's
first
2000.
time, that is usually the signal that the team has pre-positioned and will be conducting the execution in the near future. Can you tell us, in your own words, did you know Mr. Milam?
So. He was
Yes, I knew
2010.
Mr. Milam, and
In 2010, so 15.
he's a really sweet guy, and he really has become a good Christian. There's no doubt where he's going.
You know, there's been an allegation that he suffered from intellectual disability, and it was actually raised as a potential way to cease his execution. Any thoughts on that, whether or not that might be true from your experience, or whether or not you believe that he may have demonstrated some blocks to his learning?
I didn't hear the question.
Do you believe that he might have suffered from intellectual disability or from what we typically used to call retardation?
Yes,
You do.
yes, I do.
And
He
could
was slow. He was slow, I guess I should say.
okay. And was it noticeable when you dealt with him?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any reason to think that his lawyers were incorrect in regard to that claim?
I don't think so. That's what they tried to get him to stay on, but it didn't work.
I see. I thank you for this. I think we're probably going to, in a few short minutes, show an interview with someone you know, I believe, regarding his background and regarding his life. Danny Allen.
Yeah, she's one of the there's two death row angels, Texas death row angels, and she's one of them. I'm the other one.
Well, we all thank you for your help and continued support for families and folks going through this. We're going to talk for 1 minute about some related issues, and then we're going to probably go to that interview in the short minutes. If anything happens, such as you see them walk back, which usually indicates that the execution is done,
Yes.
please try and let us know.
I will. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So folks, if you're just tuning in, this is Execution Watch. My name is Pat McCann. I am filling in for the normally far more eloquent and qualified folks hosting tonight's show. My colleague and friend, Mr. Zand, is here tonight, and I'm going to ask him a couple of questions about where the current case law is and whether or not it's even appropriate for procedural defaults to be held against those who are retarded, for the old word, or intellectually disabled, for the new phrase, that face execution, whether or not this is even something that our courts should be doing. However, let's start with going this way. It is my understanding that the basic federal rule for federal habeas relief is that if you know of a fact that could change either the disposition of a case, for instance, someone was innocent, or the disposition of something that was not brought up during their original case for the death penalty, such as someone is intellectually disabled or mentally retarded. Under federal habeas rules, there is generally a firm 1-year timeline from the date that you learn something to the time when you bring it in for habeas relief. Tell me something. My understanding of both the juvenile and what was originally the retardation and is now the intellectual disability exemption from eligibility for death was that these things were people who were not as responsible for whatever acts they may have committed, simply because whether one is young and not fully developed, or whether one is not going to improve in one's intellectual capabilities. Both of those folks, whether one is a juvenile or one is intellectually disabled, they are less morally culpable because they are less developed, and so they are less morally liable for the ultimate punishment. Is that a fair way to put those two exemptions for death?
Absolutely. That's a really great way of saying that.
All right. So if we have a person who actually is and was, whether one calls it intellectual disability or retardation, that person is not as morally culpable because they're less intellectually capable. So what is the rationale for a federal court or any reviewing court in a habeas to somehow stick an arbitrary time limit on something that takes a great amount of time to get someone or a family to simply admit or develop proof for? Can you help me understand why that is being imposed on a situation where people are never going, it doesn't matter when you find out that they're intellectually disabled, they are never getting better. There's no magical pill that makes them smarter. And this is something that existed then. If it exists now, it's not as if someone damaged them in prison. They came to this situation like that. So what possible justification does a federal judge or court extend to a decision that was obviously meant to be an exemption, not something you could bring up as long as you did it within a year? Can you talk about why that is?
I genuinely don't know why they would do that. I do know there's been so much back and forth over which factors and tests and things of that nature would be the determining factor as to whether an individual is considered intellectually disabled or not.
But that's differences about, is this test appropriate?
Sure.
Is this the right way to determine this? All understood. You want to get to the determination.
Sure.
For good or bad. But to put a time limit on it, as if this was something that, first off, it sounds like the state prosecutors deliberately avoided that question.
Right.
And second, it has been my experience dealing with both clients and with people I knew that admission of a default such as, when we were kids, we called it retardation. Now we call it intellectual disability, which is a nicer way to say the same thing. This is the 1 or 2 out of 100 that you would not let live by themselves.
Right.
You would not let sign a contract. You would not let them drive a car and read a map.
Well, I think that's where it's kind of, it's really challenging is, in my experience in dealing with my colleagues that have had these cases, they are capable of doing those things, driving a car and it's, but I think that's where it becomes tricky because similarly like to this case, I think it's such a complex question of the mind where here they said his ability to read was a factor to consider. I think that's why the push is to look into the deficits of the individual, because then you have qualities that might give the impression of something else.
Well, let's talk then about someone who actually knew this person. We have a taped interview with Danny Allen, and Danny is someone who is known at Texas's death row because she has tried to be a friend to, what I think most people would say are people on the low end of deserving mercy or kindness. we have a description of her relationship with Blaine Milam. Can we get that?
Yeah, here we go.
This is Marlo Blue for Execution Watch. I'm here with Danny Allen. Danny, how are you today?
I'm making it.
Yeah.
I am making it.
Of course, we're here today because of Blaine Milam. And Blaine's a friend of yours. Talk about Blaine a little bit for us.
I got to know him back probably in 2018. He was very close friends with Billy Wardlow.
And Billy Wardlow was
my fiance.
Right.
Yes. Billy was on the road too. And Blaine was also close to another friend of mine, Rick Rhodes and Brian Davis.
Right.
So, I heard very funny things about Blaine through the years. And then in 2018, him, and at the time he was married, his wife, asked me if I wanted to visit. I was like, absolutely. I've heard so many funny things about Blaine. So of course I wanted to. I got to know him, and here we are. The last couple years, maybe 3 years. If I know he doesn't have a visit, I make sure he gets one. He's like my little brother.
How do you get accepted to actually visit somebody on death row?
So you become friends with someone. You start writing them. When you start writing them, if you're not going into the unit as a religious organization, you start writing an individual. You pick one. You start writing them. Most of them put ads up on any type of Write a Prisoner. That website has a lot of the men on death row. I'm not sure if any of the women, I do not believe they're on there, but there's men and women on death row in Texas. Mm-hmm. So if you wish to write someone, just write them. Now you do have to have their address and information. If you want to write it snail mail, as we call it, good old-fashioned post office, you have to mail it to a P.O. box in Dallas.
Right.
But if you want to write it to where they get it fairly quickly, that would be an account on Securus.
And Securus is actually the one that provides the tablets.
There's so many things that they can do on those tablets.
Right.
And, there's games, listen to music, watch movies. But having that personal connection with someone on the outside is so important. And regardless of why they're there, they're still a human being. So if you feel the need to write to them, please do. Let them know that you are thinking about them. If you want to, you can put a return stamp so they can write you back. Some of them do not have stamps to write, so it's hard for them to respond back to you. But you can put a return stamp.
That's electronic stamps.
Yeah, let me clarify that. That is an electronic stamp. That's the way that they do communicate. If you choose to be a part of someone's life, if you choose to start writing, continue writing. Don't just stop, because that's just like someone, what you're saying to them. Mm-hmm. That little vision out in the world, that's their whole world, because they're envisioning, oh, she just went to the grocery store. Oh, I remember going to the grocery store, those aisles and Blaine, he is a fanatic over mayonnaise. Oh my.
Wait, does that mean he's a Hellman's guy, or?
He loves Hellman's. Now, him and I had this discussion. There's Dukes and Blue Plate. Now, I'm from Louisiana, so we're talking he's a Hellman's, and I'm,
No.
And do you know Big Will Spears?
No.
Well, he had a date a couple years ago, and it was stayed. But him and Blaine are fairly good friends, and one Saturday night, Mayonnaise Gate started because Big Will managed to get his mayonnaise stolen from Blaine, because I thought... Big Will said, "You didn't know he didn't like mayonnaise?" And I said, "No, this whole time he's been pretending like he liked it. I thought he liked it." Well, I gave it to Big Will's. All of a sudden he was like, "What?" So that was the beginning of Mayonnaise Gate.
So there are hijinks even on the road?
There are. just because they're, there's jokes and stuff, they don't, while they're there, or in Blaine's situation, he did, I talked to him right before coming here, and there's some exciting news. For the first time, there's actual evidence that he's factually innocent. So his attorneys have managed to file that. When you look at the crime itself, it's horrifying. But until you know Blaine, there's no way that this man did this. Absolutely no way. Because he is like a kid. He is like a big old kid who loved his mama. Well, still loves his mama. Even she passed away earlier this year. He's just an amazing man.
Give us a picture of what Blaine is like.
He is the type, even though he's on death row in prison, he is the type, when he calls, he makes little jokes. You remember back years ago, Rick James, I'm Rick James. But I think anyone remembers that, right? So, I pick up the phone, it's like, yeah. I'm Rick James. And it's different. His favorite group is the Eagles. My favorite group is the Eagles. And I think that's one of the reasons why we got so close. We talked about music. So I pick up the phone and he just starts blurting out an Eagles song or a Bob Seger song, he has this playful side to him. I've never, in all the years that I've been visiting him, I've never seen him angry. I've seen the look of when his mom had she couldn't breathe and her oxygen tank ran out. And I saw, because I ran over there, and the look of helplessness. He was helpless. He couldn't do anything because he was behind the glass.
But when you go to visit, you do not actually get physically near anyone. Can you explain the setup a little bit?
They are like small cages, small little cages, and they are locked in. And you are on the other side of the glass, and you're both on telephones. But all you can do is look at each other, hear one another through the phone. Most of the time when you're on the phone, you can barely understand him. Mm-hmm. The quality of the call is so horrible. So that's what it's like. You sit there trying to hear them. You try to gather any type of emotion from them just by looking at them. I've had it when it went a good 30 minutes when, the guards were waiting to move him to another booth. And, during that wait, you just have to sit there and stare at each other, make funny faces, do like hand impressions of what's going on because, the officers have to move him to another booth where the phone, and of course you make sure that they pick up that phone before, so you can make sure that, you can hear them, because visits are just 2 hours. Sometimes the officers try to make you leave before your visit is over. I can tell you on leading up to an execution date, you get 2 full days of visits. So that's going from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then on the day of the execution, you are there from 8 a.m. until noon. Now, when I say 8 a.m., I'm meaning the earliest you can go in is 8 a.m. And unless they communicate that to the people up front, they will just be like searching you at 8 a.m. And it's like, for instance, with Billy, I'm like, oh, no, baby, no, I'm supposed to be back there right now because we only have, that's it. I can only see his face right now until noon. You're going to let me in.
Right.
And I imagine it's like that for especially mamas.
Yeah. Oh. And I can imagine that most people are not really familiar with what they can and cannot do. And you're pretty well versed, so you would know what to say and what you can and cannot do.
That's a game that Blaine because it never fails. I can count on one hand since I've been visiting him how many times I haven't had to call for the duty warden or rank. And when I say rank, I don't mean a sergeant.
Right.
I mean rank, because something inevitably happens. And every time something happens, that takes away from your visit. They depend on you not doing anything because you want to concentrate on the visit.
Right.
And Blaine's like, and the last time it happened, Blaine went, "Whoa, we almost got through a whole visit without you calling." You get 2 hours. 2 hours to go to the machines, get their food, make sure it's heated up, because Polensky does have microwaves. Make sure that food is heated up, and make sure they get it, and then they have the remainder of the time to eat it. But if the machines if they're filling the machines, they don't let you go to the machines. I'm like, okay, all right, I see you, I gotcha. How long is it going to be? Because he's the amount of food I'm fixing to get Blaine and his mayonnaise, you're going to need a truckload of mayonnaise, okay? Things like that happen, whether it's intentional or not. It happens. And sometimes I do think it's intentional, especially when they see me come in, they're like, oh.
One of the big questions that we get all the time is, what do you do on an execution day?
Linda and I pretty much know just about everyone on the row.
And just for clarification, Linda, of course, is the other half of the death row angels.
Yes. So we may not visit everyone,
Right.
but they pretty much know who we are. On an execution date, if the person that is scheduled is not a personal friend of ours, like we don't visit them,
Right.
we'll meet at the Walls unit and set up. And Gloria got us in trouble with the OIG and our, yeah, so
Imagine that.
imagine Gloria. I mean, they were threatening to arrest us, and it just went downhill very fast. On those days that we typically start gathering between 4 and 4:30. Now, on a date that we're close to the person being executed, we typically meet at the unit to visit, because it's going to be a Thursday. So some of Blaine's friends want to, say hi. So I'm going to be visiting on the Tuesday and Thursday to give his friends some time who are on different pods, because they live in pods. So they're not all close in proximity to one another. So I'll give them a chance for them to go, wave, do the whole bro thing with their chest, and they do. And so, give them a chance to do that. And then at noon, they escort whoever's seeing the person being executed, they escort them out. Then we head to the hospitality house. The hospitality house is run by the Baptist Church in Huntsville. That is the building where the people, their friends, their family, whoever's being executed, it's their friends and family. It's also the place where the chaplains from TDC do their talk about what to expect, which it's never what they say to expect, but they say this is what you can expect. And then after if it takes place, or if it doesn't take place, let's talk about that. If it doesn't take place, Gloria and a bunch of us will go out to eat at a Mexican restaurant and celebrate the life, that was saved that night. If that doesn't happen, then we go to a chapel, Grace Baptist Church. It's on Highway 19 in Huntsville, and that is where they bring the body. And that is where you can spend a little bit of time with your people while they're still warm.
And just to be clear, this is the only time since they've been on death row, since they've been in the penitentiary, in the prison, that you actually have an opportunity to lay hands on them.
Absolutely, it is.
It's your one opportunity.
Your one and only opportunity. And I get very defensive over that because of the situation I was in with Billy. And
What happened with Billy Wardlow?
I had quite a few strong friends with me that night. And when we got to the hospital or the church, Billy and I had discussed it before, just like Blaine will be able to discuss what he wants. And Billy wanted to make sure that the word got out how family and friends are treated. Mm-hmm. Now, we never once discussed how this may go down, but my friends there were taking videos and pictures just to, it was very emotional. It was in the middle of the pandemic. Right. I mean, right in the middle. Right. And Gina, with Karn's funeral home, started screaming and said that she took her day off to come in. And you can imagine how I related to that. You took your day off? You took your day off. Well, my friend at the time, Jean, got in between us because I was going after her. So I've been told that the head of the chaplaincy called me the next day. He was executed on July 8th. They called me on July 9th, apologized to me, and said that Gina would not be representing in the Karns. She would not be the liaison between Karns and TDCJ. However, since then, I have found out that she still helps the general population people when their family, when they pass. She helps their family. She has no empathy, nothing. And I will go down saying that, but hopefully she won't be there for Blaine. She was not. I was after Billy. I was my friend Carl Bunton was executed.
Carl.
Yeah, right. And she was not there for him. So maybe they have my name, like Gina. You can't come. I know it.
The sad thing is, it's not funny, and
No.
it's so absurd.
What was even more absurd is I spent so long trying to save Billy, and it took that happening for these news media organizations to contact me, and I'm like,
right. Now
you're going to contact me over this? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it still is very emotional. I'm glad that Billy wasn't here to see that. And again, Billy was very close with Blaine. They played D&D.
Ah, he's one of the D&D guys.
He is with
legendary.
Yeah, Budo.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something else that most people don't know. There is a sort of normalcy to this. Things that you did when you were outside, you still do to a certain degree inside.
Yeah, and D&D is something that they can do to escape where they're in their mind. Don't take that, TDC.
Yeah.
Don't run with that.
That word did not mean anything.
No. But yes, they D&D. I think another one is Riff. That Blaine talks about. There's another one I can't remember. I think since they got the media app, Blaine has been a little bit distracted. I'm not sure if the D&D is actually up to par right now because they just got it in June.
You've been through so many of these now. How do you react to this, and how do you come back? Because it's got to be affecting you.
What keeps me writing to men and women is the smile, especially on Blaine's face, when we joke with one another. And I mean, he and I told him I was going to say this. Someone at the Styles unit, Curtis, Blaine said, I need you to ask Curtis, because Curtis was looking for a job inside. He's like, I have a job for him. I'm like, you do? What? He's like, ask him if he wants to be my stunt double on September 25th. And Curtis came back and said, it's a dead-end job. And then Blaine came back. This went on and tonight, when I was leaving, Blaine said, hey, can you ask David Collingsworth if he wants to be my stunt double? I was like, are we going to do this again, Blaine?
Take one for the team, David.
I know. So, and it's joking, but it's
not.
It's not joking. You know, just knowing that what I did that day for someone, whether it be just a drink, sometimes, like, you know, we can't afford much, but if I just get them a cold drink and, a candy bar, a bag of chips, anything.
Yeah, we live in the state of Texas where the heat inside those units can get up to 104 degrees. There's no air conditioning. You don't have access to cold water. Cold is nothing. If you can put the water on the floor, the concrete.
Well, they say, Marlo, that the officers are supposed to be having ice water, and they do. They have buckets, orange buckets of ice water. However, when you open that bucket, the mold around so you're at a loss. Let me take some of that cold water, not drink it, but put it on, and then just drink lukewarm water. So why wouldn't you? I know some people have done horrendous things in their life, but, Sister Mary Prejean said you're better than the worst thing that you've done.
Do you think that Blaine is a different person now?
I do, in that when he was outside, he was doing a lot of drugs. However, he does have a strong innocence claim. So and he's not using at all right now. And he has matured so much, but yet he's a big old kid. I mean, it's a mixture. So I do think he's a different person. He just wants peace in his life. And since losing his mom, that's what he's trying to reach for, is peace.
And I guess this is the tough question, but if it does come to pass, do you think he has enough inner peace to go through with this?
Well, he kind of doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, there is no choice.
There's no choice. However, I will say that he has mentioned that he will be with his mama and his dad. In fact, he's going, if it does come, he will be, we'll be cremating him, and he will be mixed with his mom. If you're thinking about writing someone on death row or in prison, just do it. Take the first step, but remember, they're human. And we are all just one click away of a handcuff. Once those handcuffs go on you, it's tough to get them off.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Danny Allen, one of the two so-called death row angels. Obviously someone who cares about the last moments of some people's lives, regardless of what they may or may not have done. Right now, let's switch over to the other angel, Linda. And
Okay, the death, they came across at 6:46, so the execution is over.
I don't want to say thank you, but I appreciate all the time you spend speaking for these folks. So I guess I'm still saying thank you. But
I love all the guys there. I just, I just would like to see that they had a chance to get out one day. And I know they're not, but I want them to get out. And a lot of them they're so sorry for what they did. And they did crazy things when they were young, but you know, there's just no forgiveness in the state of Texas at all.
Well, we're going to talk about that, but I know from you, I feel as if they had someone who cared at the last few moments, and that's more than some get.
Yes.
So thank you. Good luck in the next few days.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to finish out the last few minutes discussing a couple of things. One is the fact that it appears, and I'll ask our guest here for his view of this in a moment, but it appears that the Supreme Court, when it 20 or so more years ago decided that when someone is less capable, i.e. Intellectually disabled or mentally retarded, as folks have grown up with that phrase, may view it, those folks are placed in a special category, according to the last time the Supreme Court really dealt with this. And those categories mean less punishment, i.e. no death penalty, because of less culpability. Because someone who is retarded is not as responsible as someone who is not. There seems to be, sadly, a new trend to try and avoid that by over-attention to rules of time that were never intended to apply to this category of folks. And I'd like to ask our guest, do you think that I'm misstating this, or is the Fifth Circuit actually cutting out this form of relief? Because discovering and proving and getting someone to admit that they are intellectually disabled is a huge process.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of speaks to not necessarily mental health directly, although it could be considered that, but I think it shows the lack of understanding that we have when it comes to diagnosing and understanding the human mind, and for them to put a short arbitrary timeline on figuring those things out, I don't think it gives enough honor and credit to that actual individual, because it's so hard. I can't imagine how hard it is for them to even express and go through all the rigorous testing.
And you're not capable of doing that anyway, because you're limited in your intellectual ability.
Exactly. So I agree with you. I think that the Fifth Circuit's just more so creating the appearance of trying to resolve these issues as opposed to actually allowing the system to have a way of determining this in order to protect those individuals who are less culpable and less morally capable of being responsible.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have it here. The Fifth Circuit needs to be brought to task for its arbitrary infliction of a 1-year time limit on establishing that someone is mentally retarded, intellectually disabled, whatever phrase you choose to use. The Supreme Court decided that these folks, because they were less capable, were less culpable. It's time to force the Fifth Circuit and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals to listen to what the Supreme Court meant and what they wrote and what they said. Because there's no justification for taking the least capable of our population and holding them to an arbitrary standard that is simply ridiculous to try and impose on how we treat as a society those who are suffering from that limitation. They didn't ask to be born this way. They didn't ask to be developed this way. They are less culpable because they are less capable. And it's time to force the Fifth Circuit and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals to knock this off and to do what the Supreme Court meant for them to do, which is to give them the chance to try and prove it. And if they prove it, which is the obligation after a conviction or at the time to a jury, then let them prove it. And it doesn't matter whether you wait a year or 5 years. No one wants to be in this position. And if you think that people are going to follow an arbitrary timeline that was invented by people years before the case law came down from the Supreme Court, that retardation does matter, then you're not paying attention. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a difficult week. A man who had a reasonable claim to mental retardation, to innocence, was disregarded because he was out of time. Now, if that sounds like justice to you, well, great. If it sticks in your car just a tiny bit, well, then maybe you were paying attention in all those times when you were listening to your mother and father say what was good and what was right. For us, here at Execution Watch, this has been a sad day, but one where you got to see two people who spend their lives trying just to help these individuals. I want to thank our guests very much for coming in.
Thank you, Mr. McCown.
Giving us this time and giving us this perspective. May I ask you, do you know if anyone's trying to get the Fifth Circuit reviewed by either the Supreme Court or contrasted with other sections of our federal courts that have not taken this view?
So personally, I don't, but there are agencies that, such as the Regional Public Defender's Office, and I know they have great appellate teams and great trial attorneys that are always actively working and trying to, especially when it comes to intellectual disability, further our client's cause.
And this is the part that discourages me the most, is because the Fifth Circuit is imposing a 1-year cutoff on a group of people who didn't sit there at birth and say, you know, I'd like to be intellectually, underdeveloped.
Sure.
I would have really liked that chance to be 1 out of 100 kids that needs all the help in the world just to get through the day and make it up. Anyway, this has been Execution Watch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To the chat.
It's insane. In Jesus' name.